Hello, I'm Ollie and this is CriminOlly, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today I want to talk to you about what I've been reading this morning, something that's really helped me tap back into the basics of what I love about horror, and that is Midnight Tales magazine. So I have talked about Midnight Tales magazine on the channel before, along with its sister publication, Midnight Magazine. So the publisher, Mr. Fright, sent me a bunch of PDFs of various issues of those two magazines a while ago. And yeah, I made a video where I talked about two. So one issue of Midnight Tales and one issue of Midnight Magazine. And the PDFs have kind of been languishing on my Kindle since then. And I felt like I was reading something a bit different this morning. I didn't really feel like reading reading a novel or something like that over my morning coffee. So I picked up Midnight Tales issue 5, which was one of the ones I hadn't read yet, and I had such a good time with it. And I was reflecting back on the video I put up yesterday. So I put up a video yesterday, which you may or may not have seen, where I talk about how important editors are to the whole publishing process. So how important it is that the author's work gets edited and it is turned into, from the raw manuscript, is turned into something that is commercially viable for the publisher. And obviously a lot of what we read nowadays goes through that kind of process. A lot of what we read is kind of big bucks publishing type stuff, where the publishers are very concerned about providing something to the public that is appealing, that isn't going to offend people and all that kind of stuff. And Midnight Tales feels kind of like the opposite of that. Not because it's in any way unprofessionally put together or deliberately offensive or anything like that, but just because it's got a kind of rawness to it that is really, really appealing. And I think the problem with any kind of big commercial endeavour that's about providing entertainment is there's always a risk, isn't there, of it becoming bland. I think you see that a lot with Netflix. So my son and I were having a conversation the other day about how Netflix seemed to be incredibly good at making completely inoffensive TV shows that are kind of good enough to watch while you play Angry Birds on your phone or whatever. God, I'm showing my age there, aren't I, by saying Angry Birds instead of a more modern phone game. They're almost, a lot of their shows, it seems to me, are almost like the kind of shows you have on in the background. And to be honest, we watch Netflix in the evening sometimes, and quite often I'm replying to comments and emails and things like that while I'm watching it. So they do make some really good shows, but they also seem to be interested in just volume and just getting as much stuff out there as possible. So that for every possible Netflix subscriber, there's at least one thing that will appeal to them. But that, I think, inevitably means that quite a lot of their stuff is quite bland. And I think that that can be true for big bucks publishing as well, for the big publishing houses. Midnight Tales is, as I say, is like the opposite of that. It's it's a fanzine. It is produced by people who love horror. Mr. Fright, who's the kind of editor-in-chief who reached out to me originally, and who I've have had conversations with on Instagram and places like that, seems like a fantastic guy and someone who really genuinely loves horror and loves the kind of trashy vintage horror of the 80s that I love, and that comes through in Midnight Tales. So in the issue I read, there are 10 stories. It's just over 100 pages in total. So it was a great refreshing read this morning. There's all sorts of different stuff in those stories. There's some vampire stories. There's a really good story about kind of urban decay. There's folk horror type stuff. There's a couple of stories that touch on kind of the settlement of America by Europeans, like the Pilgrim Fathers, and that kind of thing, and witches and stuff. There's all sorts of different stuff in here, and it's all got that kind of pulpy energy, which just makes for a really, really entertaining read. And I suspect, and I might be wrong, but I suspect that whilst Mr. Fright does a great job of editing the magazine in terms of picking the stories for it and producing the magazine, and the magazine has fantastic artwork in it as well. I'll flash up some images if I can. So the magazine feels like a really good package. I suspect that the actual stories are not edited, or if they are edited by Mr. Fry, it's, it's very light touch editing, as opposed to fiction that gets published in that you buy in bookstores, which I think is quite often quite heavily published, quite heavily edited. So I think it's great that you can get this kind of rawness. You are tapping right into the creativity of new authors who are not big names, who are just trying different things and are prepared to just let their passion for the horror genre shine through in the stories they write. And that that's really true of this magazine. So it's a really different kind of horror than a lot of the horror that we see. So I just read House Still a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix, which I thought was fantastic. I absolutely loved it. But it's a novel that is so polished and so refined and so perfectly pitched that it doesn't feel artificial. It feels like a really good, really well written book. But it definitely has that kind of polish that means it has gone through multiple revisions, and I'm not saying by any means that that's a bad thing. But for me, the other side of horror is this kind of raw horror that is that's just entertaining to read, that's a bit nasty, a bit grimy, just throws all sorts of different ideas into the mix. And Midnight Tales, fulfilled that for me wonderfully. It was a great not antidote, a great contrast to House Still a Haunted House, which as I say, I really enjoyed, but which is a very particular type of horror. Midnight Tales is something completely different, but something I think that Grady Hendrix would enjoy. Clearly, he's someone who loves this kind of vintage style horror as well. So yeah, I thoroughly recommend it. I'll leave a link in the description for the video to their website where you can purchase a copy for yourself and see what you think of it. I've got another couple of issues that I haven't read yet, so I'm looking forward to diving into those. But I just enjoyed it so much this morning that I wanted to jump on and talk about it. So yeah, enjoy. Okay, time for a random book from the shelves. So I've talked about vintage horror in this video. I've talked about Grady Hendrix, so it had to be a paperback from hell, didn't it? So this is The Spirit by Thomas Page, which I have not read yet. It's been on my list to read for a while. This copy was very kindly sent to me from my Amazon wish list by a subscriber, but they didn't leave a note, so I'm not sure who it was who sent it. But yeah, looking forward to diving into this one at some point. So, hope you enjoyed that. Let me know in the comments if you read Midnight Magazine. As I say, I think it's something that any horror lover would get some fun out of. But until next time, thanks very much for watching. I hope you're safe and well out there. I hope you're reading good stuff, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.